for you tonight. First off, Republican who wants to ban kids from drag shows hosted drag parties at her home with her kids. What's going on here, Jeannie?
So we have a couple of articles that really it's going, it's intermittent. It's coming in and going. Is there an echo? Oh no. Here we go. By the way, Emily, Ethan says you're beautiful. Okay.
Thank you, Ethan. Very sweet. Okay.
Republican Arizona gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake recently insinuated that drag queens and queer people are a threat to children. But a local drag queen reminded Representative or gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake that she once brought her own kid to a drag performance. Last Saturday, Lake wrote via Twitter and Instagram, they kicked God out of schools and welcomed the drag queens. They took down the flag and replaced it with a rainbow. They seek to disarm Americans and militarize our enemies. Let's bring back the basics, God, with guns and glory. In response to that, Richard Stevens, an entertainer who performs as drag queen Barbara Seville, said that Lake has repeatedly attended his performances. Stevens also said he performed at a party that Lake attended with her own children. So, yeah, there you go.
And yeah, just file that under Hypocrisy. That's our first Hypocrisy article of the night. Keep track at home of how many of those we hit. There are several tonight.
We will be issuing scorecards for upcoming episodes where you can do the bingo thing.
Yes. Oh my God, this is the show we can do bingo cards. I love it. We can print them out off of the website. This will be coming very soon. I'm going to focus on this tomorrow morning. That's for darn sure. Great idea. Let's do it. Moving on to one of our Satan's handmaidens here. Lauren Bobert seeks grant from Pete Buttigieg even after mocking him. And though that headline is just like, oh, looking for a grant from Pete Buttigieg, it's even deeper than that, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So Lauren Bobert has made no secret of her animosity about Pete Buttigieg and his partner, as well as their children. And so Bobert has been not very nice in her comments about homosexuals, but in particular of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. I can't even pronounce the guy's name.
Buttigieg.
So she's also been arguing against President Biden's infrastructure bill that they have been working on. But she also filed for a $33.1 million grant through that very same bill for her own district. And so she wrote, with rural surface transportation grant funds, Glenwood Springs will construct a new bridge connection that will provide a critical second emergency route evacuation access between State Highway 82 and the western side of the Roaring Fork River in the city's south corridor. Congress passed the infrastructure bill in late 2021, and Biden quickly signed it into law. Bobert opposed the bill, calling it wasteful and garbage, and she said that the Republicans who supported it were rhinos, Republicans in name only. And so, she told a Colorado newspaper that she saw no conflict between opposing the bill and requesting money from the same bill. I am for investing in rural Colorado, but Biden's so-called infrastructure bill was not the right way to do it. So there you go.
I forget. Were we saying something about hypocrisy before? I can't recall.
Yeah.
Across the pond, Tory MP Nick Fletcher doubles down on claim that trans kids are just going through a phase. Oh, that old lie and trope again.
Yeah, we're trying to bring some of the highlights of what's happening in the UK to, to the American shores to let us know, to keep us mindful that we are not the only ones fighting the issues that we are seeing. In fact, there's a lot of things that are happening between the US and the UK that are actually parallel. On Friday, June 17th, it was reported that the MP for Don Valley called on head teachers in the area to clarify their positions on trans pupil sharing his own anti-trans views in a letter. I believe that quite simply, boys are boys and girls are girls, the letter obtained by the BBC said. Fletcher added that in his childhood, some girls were tomboys and some young boys liked the company more of girls. His letter continued, this in itself is nothing new. What is new is the way it is now viewed. It appears from the media that it is now seen by our children and young people that they may be or actually are transgender when it comes to feelings of being a boy or a girl. I am afraid affirming something that is nothing more than a phase. So in response to the letter going public, said MP said he stands by his views but is deeply regretful of the hurt it may have caused anyone. This was a private letter sent by me to the head teachers of all the schools in my constituency. I have kept away from social media on this subject as I understand the negativity that can come when discussing the issue. So as a public person discussing a public issue with schools, he didn't want that to come out as public. Go and figure that one. But yeah, the UK is also dealing with a lot of this stuff that we are dealing with. There are just some very, very more vocal, independent, or vocal people within the government that are having to deal with.
Well, and here's where we hit some of my hypocrisy, where I am on a news show commenting on political decisions and things like that, having no political experience. But I would think that someone, when you're talking about something that's a medical issue, that's a mental and medical issue, that these folks would consult with the experts, and know that this stuff is not a phase, or how to tell if it is a phase, those sorts of things, which you could get from talking to someone who actually has experience or knowledge in this area.
I am not going to lie, you lost my attention partway through that. Because you said, you're on a show talking about politics with no political background, and then you said something about listening to people when it comes to mental issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I just couldn't help myself. Well, damn, I'm an expert in that because I got all kinds of mental issues.
Let's get to, I think this is one of my favorite articles for today. Gay Republican group banned from the GOP convention. And why this is fun is, after years spent telling Republicans that LGBTQ rights aren't important and mocking the community, this group was surprised to find out that the party listened to them. Surprise, surprise. What's going on here?
All right. So last week we talked about the Texas Republican Convention, and we were talking about how the Republican platform for the Texas Republican Party was very anti-LGBTQIAP+. It was an open declaration of war against the LGBTQIAP+ community as a whole, not just trans people, but everybody who's identified within the group. So one of the things we didn't talk about in depth was that the Log Cabin Republicans, who are an LGBTQIAP+ group within the Republican Party, were denied access to the Texas GOP convention. They were not even allowed a booth at the convention. That the Texas GOP gathering together to create the platform or to vote upon the platform that was going to designate how Texas was going to move forward refused to allow Republicans into the convention who happened to be identified with the LGBTQIA+ community. Now, this only got worse when the head of the Log Cabin Republicans wrote a commentary piece for the USA Today condemning the party and the platform, but then turning around and saying that the National Party is a welcoming space. And it only gets more difficult from here. The Texas GOP isn't just on the wrong side of history. They're short-sightedly on the wrong side of the modern Republican Party. Moran, I'm sorry, Ethan, that was a legitimate mistake. It was a legitimate mistake. I was not trying to make fun. Moran asserted that Donald Trump made the Republican Party inclusive. It's difficult to understand just how game-changing Trump's presidential campaigns and presidency were for LGBT conservatives who were suddenly included as welcome members of the party after decades of being sidelined. He mentioned Trump declaring that marriage equality is a settled issue and appointing gay people to his administration. But also he ignored many of the things that were not supportive of the LGBTQIA+ community, such as endorsing discriminating provisions in federally funded programs, opposing the Equality Act, and appointing overtly anti-LGBTQIA+ judges and cabinet members. And shall we not even begin to talk about the Supreme Court justices who were seated during that same time? When we go on to talk about the overall impact of the Trump presidency on the LGBTQIA+ community, we cannot exclude the trans military ban. We cannot exclude revoking trans inclusive guidance for schools. And these are things that were overlooked by somebody who says that the modern Republican Party is LGBTQIA+ inclusive. And then we toss in the Don't Say Gay law, which some within the Log Cabin Republicans did approve of at the very beginning. Some of them began to question it as they went on. Moran went on to say, our members vigorously oppose this radical gender culture war just as much as Texas Republicans do. Our organization vocally defended Governor Ron DeSantis and the Florida parental rights and education law and slammed Democrats for lying about it. We oppose teaching young children about sex and gender ideology in schools. We believe allowing biological men to compete in women's sports is unfair. We have been on the front lines in these fights because, unlike LGBT activists on the left, we do not agree with the radical notion that sex and gender are meaningless. And that right there would be enough. But then, regardless of what Texas does, our members are proud conservatives and will keep fighting Democrats however they can. Ethan, I know I'm going to try not to say anything that will upset the balance that we have in our relationship. But when we are talking about the fact that you have a significant Republican Party state Republican Party come out with an aggressively militaristic approach to how to cope with LGBTQIA inclusion, and pretty much saying we don't want LGBTQIA plus inclusion within the Republican Party in Texas. And then you have someone who is leading the organization of LGBTQIA plus voices within the Republican Party saying, oh no, they're the outliers. No, no, and no. Texas is going to be followed by, it's been preceded by Maine. It's going to be followed by some of these other states, and they are going to be more militaristic in how they reject LGBTQIA plus inclusion within this country. Texas is not an outlier. It is a forerunner to a major swing in Republican stance toward LGBTQIA plus populations within the country.
All right, for our next bingo item here, I could not come up with a word that I liked for this.
Righteousness, idiot.
No, the cutting off your nose to spite your face. Not even self-harm. I don't know what it is. But I don't think there's a word in the English language for that encapsulates what that phrase means. As you'll see in, I would like to describe this article with. GOP senator may block school lunch funding unless staff can discriminate against trans kids.
Senator Roger Marshall from Kansas is attempting to block a bipartisan effort to fund school lunch programs because he does not like that schools should not discriminate against LGBTQ students when distributing food or giving financial assistance to disadvantaged students. So as of June 30th, the funding runs out for school lunch programs in Kansas. Democrats are trying to get everything done. This is a bipartisan effort to get this bill passed to fund school lunches. Marshall says he is contemplating objecting the measure, and it will only take one senator to block an expedited vote and delay the process. Marshall said, I'm just afraid that schools in Kansas won't have school lunches because of this administration's radical view on transgender issues, and I'm afraid that they're going to raid the school lunch program over that issue. Marshall claims that the Biden administration is using school lunch issue to gain leverage over schools' LGBTQ policies. He is blaming the Biden administration for his decision to not fund school lunches in his own farkin' state.
Of course, yeah, blame everybody else. Back over across the pond, here we bounce again. Labor MP explains how Tory attacks on trans rights, refugees, and railway workers are all linked. What does she say here?
One of the things that I talk about is the intersectionality of trans and trans-adjacent issues to wider issues within the world, not just within the US, but around the world. So in the UK, there was a railway strike that, was going to slow down transportation within the UK. So Zara Sultana came out and began to describe how there is an intersectional point between the refugees, the Rwandan refugees, the anti-trans agenda, and the demonstration of the railway workers. The Rwanda policy, which has nothing to do with tackling people smuggling or everything to do with whipping up, it has nothing to do with tackling people smuggling, and it has everything to do with whipping up hate, demonizing marginalized groups, and pitting people who were born here against people who seek asylum here. She added, it's also what the refusal to ban trans conversion therapy is about, letting abusive practices against trans people go unpunished in order to pit cis women against trans women. It's also what the demonization of railway workers and the RMT is all about, vilifying workers who are standing up for their jobs, for their pay, for their working conditions, and pitting those railway workers against other workers. It's all an attempt to distract and divide our time with this government. This government is overseeing the cost of living emergency and a growing poverty crisis across the country. The problem isn't railway workers. It's not refugees. It's not trans women. The problem is this Tory government and the billionaires that back them.
Yeah, and she claimed in a different part of the article that, yeah, it's all just a smokescreen to basically hide the fact that they're inept and, you know, just kind of divert the attention from that and put it on, oh, it's all of these people's problems. Your problems are because of these people, not
Right.
because of us. Don't look behind the curtain.
Yep.
Back over here, Joe Biden's proposed Title IX amendments hailed as a triumph for LGBT plus kids. What's going on here?
So Title IX is a very important amendment within the education amendments. And on the 50th anniversary of Title IX being initially approved, there was an expansion of that would ensure LGBTIAP plus students are protected under the law. And among some of the things that have been implemented is that preventing someone from participating in school programs and activities consistent with their gender identity would cause harm in violation of Title IX. Also, the definition of sexual harassment would be expanded. And so what we're seeing here is the Biden administration trying to expand Title IX to help minimize some of the impact of the anti-trans sports legislation that we have seen. Title IX, in its most realistic and relevant ways, is going to look out for students' interests in those schools that are funded by public monies. And in this case, because anti-trans legislation targeting transgender, in particular girls and women in athletics, Title IX would now come into play because it would establish that if you try to stop someone from playing because you have a law on the books that says they can't play, then you're going to have to deal with the Title IX, Department of Education, all that fun stuff there.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. That's good. You can't use government money to discriminate against its citizens. In more good news, House votes to clarify that LGBT plus people and women can be president. It's a bizarre thing that they feel this is necessary, but apparently it's something that we need to do these days.
So as we are moving forward with the letter of the law, trying to roll back things that are not included in the Constitution, the 21st Century President Act was passed through the House, and it basically puts into the letter of the law that women and LGBTQ plus people can indeed be eligible for presidency. Tuesday's vote last week targeted part of the U.S. code that concerns threats to presidents, former presidents, and their immediate family. The issue is that the code defines immediate family as the wife of a former president during his lifetime, the widow of a former president until her death or remarriage, and minor children of a former president until they reach 16 years of age. The bill will strike all of that and replace it with the spouse instead of the wife, the surviving spouse. So this is going to, sort of open up a little bit of clarity when it comes to ideas such as we have a vice president who is a woman and has a husband. So now, looking at that down the road, it would definitely, provide coverage if Kamala Harris was going to be moving forward to, to the office of the presidency. But, we still haven't, we still don't see a large movement of officially stating that anyone of gender or sexual orientation or those type of issues can definitely be stated as president. So it's just something we're going to have to look out for.
I agree with what Winter said in chat. Hopefully we can get it passed. It seems like a small, insignificant thing, but people will still fight it. It's great. Speaking of those people, Republicans want to let unsupportive parents sue doctors who treat their transgender children.
So I really struggled to put this one on because when this article popped up, I saw one of the most horrible situations possible, and that was Senator Tom Cotton from the natural state Arkansas was one of the bill's sponsors. A group of Republicans has introduced a bill that would deny federal funds to any gender-affirming medical care for transgender individuals. The bill would also allow anyone who receives such care and their parents to sue the medical professionals who provided it. But the bill is based on a lot of the, information that we've seen that is basically just rhetoric and it's not backed up by facts or science. The Protect Minors from Medical Malpractice Act of 2022 would give individuals who were given puberty blockers, hormone replacement therapy, and surgical procedures and their parents up to 30 years after the age of 18 to sue the medical professionals who administered their care. This is a financial incentive to people who could be detransitioners. And I use that word because that is their language. This is what Senator Tom Cotton said. Gender transition procedures aren't safe or appropriate for children. Unfortunately, radical doctors in the United States perform dangerous, experimental, and even sterilizing gender transition procedures on young kids who cannot even provide informed consent. Our bill allows children who grow up to regret these procedures to sue for damages. Any doctor who performs these irresponsible procedures on kids should pay.
Wow. LGBT students would get new protections under a Biden plan. So
that's the title.
Back in the opposite end.
Yeah, that's the Title IX. So we can skip
Title IX again. Okay. Over to Spain. Spain takes its first step towards letting trans people self-determine legal gender.
So Spain has approved a draft of a new gender recognition law. The Council of Ministers approved a bill on Monday, June 27th, today, which, right, today, 27th? Today's 27th, which if passed through the parliament will allow over 16s to legally change their name and gender on their identity documents through a self-determination system. Those between 14 and 16 would require parental or guardian consent to change gender, while children between 12 and 14 would require authorization from a judge to change their legal gender. But, we have Spain basically saying we're going to recognize that anyone over 16 has the right to self-determine their identity. And so hopefully as this moves forward, this is going to give a little more freedom to Spanish individuals in the trans community, that sense of self-determination.
Mm-hmm. Is this a follow-up to a story we've had before that a Washington state man was arrested after threatening mass slaughter of LGBTQ people? No, this is a different one. Never mind. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, this is a
There's
diff.
one. There's one headline that was similar, and I started reading. I thought maybe it was the same one, but it's a different.
No, I mean, that's the sad thing is how many of these are coming up. A man in Oak Harbor, Washington was arrested after repeatedly posting on social media about his desire to kill LGBTQ people and shouting threatening rhetoric at his neighbors. Tyler Dinsmore had posted threats focused on the June 18th Anna Cortez Pride Parade, asking followers to talk me out of it. It also recently posted that he may not make it through this F month and that he was a 9mm away from Fed posting 2 F slurs at Home Depot yesterday. According to Seattle News, a neighbor reported the 27-year-old to local police after he shouted at her and her wife that it used to be legal to kill gay people. She later spotted Dinsmore wearing a handgun on his hip. Another neighbor claimed that Dinsmore, who is white, had once pointed a gun at the neighbor's black nephew. Can't hear you there, Em.
Perfect. Sounds like a great guy, and I love the complete lack of accountability. You know, I'm thinking of doing these all these horrible things. Talk me out of it. Putting the responsibility on other people.
Yeah,
like that's great. That's such great character. Let's do something that is a follow up on a story we've done in the past. Did police help Proud Boys disrupt drag queen story hour in North Carolina? What's going on here?
actually, this is not a follow up. This is yet another event where members of a local Proud Boy group disrupted a drag queen story hour in the Pine Valley Library in Wilmington, North Carolina. Local drag queens were reading stories to children, and deputies from the New Hanover County Sheriff's Office were called after reported members of the Cape Fear Proud Boys demonstrated outside the library. The situation escalated when several masked protesters entered the library, allegedly uttering anti-gay slurs at folks in the library, and attempted to enter the room where the story hour was taking place. Some attendees claimed that the sheriff escorted the protesters to the room, and so the authorities came back in a strict denial of that. The New Hanover County Sheriff's Office released this statement. The New Hanover County Library hosted a Pride Story Time reading at the New Hanover County Library Pine Valley branch. During the event, which was held in a private room in the library, a group of demonstrators assembled in the parking lot to the library. Sheriff deputies responded to a call of a disturbance. After a period of time, a small group of demonstrators entered the library, which is open to the public. The library went on to issue this statement. Members of the protesting group were not allowed in the closed room where the event had been held, and families were still in. And there was no disturbance inside the building. Linda Thompson, who is the county's chief diversity, equity, and inclusivity officer, also said in a statement, sheriff's deputies and library staff also provided help to parents and kids who were still in attendance on where to exit the library following the event. Parents and children were not in danger at any time. But some of those who were actually in the library gave a slightly different story of what happened. Local activists said that a man wearing a Let's Go Brandon hat entered the library and unsuccessfully tried to enter the room. They said he left the library and a group of 7 to 8 demonstrators entered the library and headed to the room where the reading was taking place. One of the activists said she heard the men making disparaging remarks, calling the event wicked and decrying using taxpayer money for pornography, among other statements. This activist also wrote on the sheriff's office Facebook post, "This is an absolute lie and you know it. Many of us witnessed with our own eyes the sheriff's office escort the Proud Boys and their clan into the building straight to the room where children as young as one were with their parents, while they shouted obscenities and threats. Only library staff and a handful of child advocates were able to intervene. This group, along with the officers who appear in the photos and on camera, were with them as they taunted parents and children, both in the library, in their personal tour with the sheriff's office, and outside. Others claimed that demonstrators were escorted to the room by a member of the sheriff's office. Others denied that it was actually peaceful, that they were indeed harassing not just members of the Story Hour, but also other patrons of the library.
Very interesting take on those drag Story Hour stories. Wow. Okay. Here's a victory. North Carolina to issue accurate birth certificates for trans people without requiring surgery.
Yes.
That's a nice win.
That's a big win for North Carolina. The state of North Carolina is clear to allow for anyone to apply for a birth certificate that reflects their gender identity. Ethan, you're trying to get me to come there. As soon as you get rid of a couple of problematic people, we can talk. But under the consent judgment, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services and other state government officials must provide accurate birth certificates that reflect an applicant's sex, consistent with their gender identity and without having to undergo surgery. There are still states within the United States that you must provide surgical proof that you have had gender affirming surgery before you can apply for a gender change on your birth certificate. And there are some states that are trying to correct that as we go. But it sets forth the process by which people born in North Carolina can correct the sex designation on their birth certificates. Specifically, a transgender person born in North Carolina may correct the sex designation on their birth certificate by submitting a sworn statement accompanied by a passport, state-issued ID, such as a driver's license, or a certification issued by a licensed healthcare professional, social worker, or case manager that will confirm the person's gender identity. This is nice stuff. This is big stuff.
Yeah. All you have to do is make a sworn statement. And as Jeannie knows, I like swearing in my statements.
As long as it's not on here, because you're a good girl and you don't swear.
Yeah, on a couple of the shows here, I don't.
Sorry.
When they talk about the world going to hell in a handbasket, there is one hand that I think is above all that we think of here in the trans community that would be holding that basket, and that is our that is Marjorie Taylor Greene. And now we get into the block about the evil shenanigans that she's up to these days.
She's got a triple play this week, so I'm very happy.
She always has multiple. I'm surprised that Lauren Bobert only has one as her counterpart in this idea here. But Marjorie Taylor Greene's husband quietly invested $295,000 into pro-LGBTQ and pro-Black Lives Matters companies to profit off of them. What's going on here, Jeannie?
So, Marjorie Taylor Greene has given new definition to vocal disagreement, shall we say, with Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ people, many of the organizations that, she even said, there was a Jewish space satellite that will burn people. I don't know. But anywho, Marjorie Taylor Greene has been, talking about how BLM and critical race theory and LGBTQ and transgender people are all such a drain on our country. Her husband, though, Perry Greene, bought almost $300,000 worth of stock in pro-LGBTQ and pro-racial justice companies, according to a personal financial disclosure. The companies include Costco, Goldman Sachs, Home Depot, Intel, Nestle, Procter & Gamble, UPS, and Visa. Previously, they had invested in Disney and Walmart, who are definitely not on the Republican investment portfolio suggestions right now. But the fact that her portfolio or her husband's portfolio has been revealed to show that he is willing to pay money to gain money from pro-LGBT and pro-racial justice companies does set up a little bit of a question on how these two are working out their relationship.
In Snowflake Territory, Marjorie Taylor Greene rails that Department of Justice won't prosecute people who put stickers on her anti-trans sign. This is great. This is like the snowflakiest of all snowflake moves here.
This one is new. I mean, this is next level stuff. So a couple of years ago, Marjorie Taylor Greene and one of her colleagues, Representative Mary Newman of Illinois, got into a bit of a back and forth. So Newman has a daughter who is transgender, and she had posted a trans pride flag outside of her office. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is exactly across the office from Representative Newman, posted a sign that said, "There are two genders, male and female, trust the science." Well, shortly after that, her sign was vandalized a number of times, and she demanded that surveillance cameras be installed to monitor her sign. Now, Capitol Police have evidence of who has been vandalizing her sign. Turns out it was Representative Jake Auchincloss, I guess, from MA, Massachusetts, Chief of Staff Tim Hysom. She wants this individual to be punished to the severest limits of the law.
Of course.
Because this is what she believes. The mainstream media launched a vicious campaign against me, claiming I attacked her. But the truth was she attacked me, and I stood my ground defending the truth, talking about the sign. My sign has been attacked 11 times total, but her flag, 0. I felt very unsafe. I felt my life was in danger. She went on to try to draw a connection between her perceived mistreatment by her congressional colleagues and the way conservative Republican voters and many Americans feel treated. They feel mistreated because this place only cares about itself, as she continued in a wide-ranging rant that referenced everything from baby formula shortage to the war in Ukraine. She expressed outrage that the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, traveled to Ukraine. The bastard went all the way to Ukraine to talk about petty things like Russian war crimes instead of focusing on prosecuting Hysom for vandalizing her sign.
How dare he?
Right?
Oh my God.
I know. So anyway, the thing is that if you put a sticker on Marjorie Taylor Greene's sign, which says, okay, remember, the sign says there are two genders, male and female, trust the science. She believes that this is an attack on her Christian beliefs.
Wow. I love that her sign doesn't follow the logic. Like it says there are two genders and it says trust the science. Well, it's like you're saying completely different messages here. Do we want to trust the science or do we want to trust that there's only two genders? Because those don't line up. So
Mimi, how dare you?
Highly punishable by law. Democratic congressman blames Marjorie Taylor Greene for threat to kill his children. This isn't the first time that Ms. Greene has been accused of inciting violence against a Democratic Congress member. What's going on here?
So Eric Swalwell of California tweeted that Marjorie Taylor Greene incited violence against his family after he received a racist and homophobic death threat, which mentioned a conspiracy theory she repeated about him. In a June 22nd tweet, Swalwell wrote that while giving a tour inside of the Capitol, a child's father yelled his name and then told his child with him, "That's Swalwell. He's trouble. He doesn't back Trump." Swalwell continued, "I kept walking and felt sad for the boy being raised in a cult family." In response to that tweet, Greene responded with, "No way that happened, because we know all good Trump supporting fathers would say that's the Democrat who had sex with a Chinese spy." Greene's response pushed an unsubstantiated rumor that Swalwell's alleged relationship with Christine Fang, a suspected Chinese intelligence operative who associated with the congressman in 2014 and 15. While Swalwell's critics have accused him of being compromised, Swalwell has said that he cut off ties with Fang once the FBI warned him about her in 2015. Nevertheless, allegations of their relations have been oft repeated by Republicans and right-wing media figures. In response to the comments, Swalwell wrote via Twitter, "Marjorie loves to play the victim, but she's an inciter of violence. Her constant attacks, even after the FBI said I was never suspected of wrongdoing, led to threatening calls like this. The caller from today threatened to kill my 3 children." And then he attached the audio. I am not going to play the audio, but the caller said, "Hey, you little blank sucker, you still banging the Chinese spy Fang Fang and stinking up the effing Capitol with your farts, you little sea sucker. We're coming to your house this weekend. Gonna get you and them little mutant bastards, them little mutant offspring of yours, we're going to get you." So yeah,
I'm curious. Do you know what the legal penalty is for threatening a public official's children as it compares to putting stickers on a sign? Are those?
I think it is not quite as petty as war crimes in an Eastern European country during a time of war. I don't think it's as petty as that, but I also think that it's probably not quite as, damaging as putting googly eyes on official campaign pictures of Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Okay. Moving on, this one's disappointing for me. I mean, it's not surprising, but Tesla lays off LGBTQ plus and diversity leaders after Elon Musk has super bad feeling. So they've laid off their LGBT community president and diversity lead as part of a wider set of layoffs. And what's this thing about the super bad feeling, Jeannie?
So these were reportedly attached to a wider set of layoffs that were happening. But a considerable portion of the layoffs that happened were within the diversity inclusivity programs, including a 5-year veteran, a Tesla recruiter and its volunteer LGBTQ plus president, and an engineer who volunteered as diversity and inclusion leader. Both employees had been promoted 3 times and had worked for Tesla for 5 and 4 years, respectively. There's no suggestion that Tesla targeted those in diversity and inclusion for redundancies. Earlier in the month, Elon Musk had reportedly told Tesla executives that 10% of the workforce needed to be cut after the CEO had a super bad feeling about the economy. Elon Musk originally said the layoffs would be limited to full-time staff. However, hourly employees were ultimately included the list of employees that were let go. So as there's kind of been an ongoing revelation of Elon Musk's ties within certain groups, there are some speculations that Elon Musk is trying to eliminate LGBTQ plus connections within the company. Those are speculations. I'm not going to claim that.
Yeah, I just I have experience with layoffs at the company that I worked at, and there are times when things like this are strategically lumped into larger layoffs.
Yes.
So that there isn't the look of impropriety, and so it just makes me kind of wonder. There's no way to prove it, and it's just unfortunate that those people were part of this as well.
Yeah, Ethan, one of these days you and I are going to have a long conversation with a 12-pack between us, okay? And we're going to find out what those disagreements are in full. Now, one of us is going to end up without underwear.
This is a tough one, y'all. This is a tough one. This is something we knew about generally. We'd heard things. I don't know how deep Jeannie's going to get into this because it's pretty gruesome, but the war crimes against LGBT plus people in the Ukraine are worse than people can imagine. This headline reads. What is actually going on here?
When we initially reported on the rising hostilities between Russia and Ukraine, one of the things that we drew attention to was the focus on LGBTQ leaders and organizers within Ukraine, that the Russian military had been given lists of individuals, and among those lists of individuals were people who are on the LGBTQ plus organizations within Ukraine. We know that war crimes are going to happen in a time of war. It cannot be avoided. There is no such thing as a civil war. There are going to be atrocities that happen. But anything that may be done by soldiers or contractors, military contractors, outside of normal or considered civil combat would be investigated for war crime. So, officially defined, violations of international humanitarian law that incur individual criminal responsibility under international law. So during the 4 months of Russia's full-scale invasion, there have been a number, and when we say number, we're talking about a huge number of accusations levied against the Russian invasion. In many cases, these are labeled as terrorism, not just combat. There have already been several convictions of atrocities. A 21-year-old soldier was found guilty of murdering an unarmed civilian. 2 other soldiers were sentenced for opening fire on non-military targets. Cases have been opened in at least 80 more incidents. We made the comment during the Marjorie Taylor Greene segment that we have sent people from the U.S. to go over to investigate the war crimes to see what may have been happening. There have been investigators sent from all over the globe to Ukraine to see firsthand what has been happening in that country. Let's see. I want to try to make. I want to make sure that I'm reading this and not including anything.
That's too graphic. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to do anything that's going to harm. So we do have an individual who has been on the ground there. This is the individual who's been on the ground. From what I have seen, there is a vile anti-gay agenda, which has included desires and plans to maim and kill gay men. He describes it as a hunt. So this is we're talking about, you know. So here, let me finish this up. The war is real here in every part of the country, and crime is part of the war, whether it is attacking civilians with chemicals, bombs, or acid. It is happening, and the bad guys will be prosecuted no matter who they maim, kill, or torture. And I want this message to be very clear. This includes finding justice for every person in Ukraine, no matter what gender, no matter who they are sleeping with. Just have your readers understand, no matter what, we will get justice. I was trying to do it as much as possible, but the story just went bad.
Yeah, it's a rough one. So we'll jump over to some good news, and I love this one. The National Park Service will open an LGBTQ history visitor center next to the Stonewall Inn.
Yes. In 2024, the Stonewall National Monument Visitor Center will be opened up next door to the Stonewall Inn. And this will be the first LGBTQ visitor center within the National Park Service. And it's being sponsored by some of the best known queer entertainers and allied companies in the nation. The center pledges to provide an immersive experience by hosting tours, exhibits, and lectures. The center will also serve as an office for park rangers overseeing the Stonewall Inn National Monument, which includes the bar and Christopher Park and the surrounding streets involved in the 1969 uprising. So, I mean, if you're headed to New York in the next couple of years, you may want to, in 2 years, you may want to make plans to visit the new Park Service opening.
Keeping on that vein of positive news, a new queer house share platform to help LGBT plus people find safe, affirming homes. I love this. This is a project near and dear to my heart. What's going on here, Jeannie?
So we have talked a number of times about how LGBTQ plus people are some of the highest percentage people represented among those without homes. And in those places where they do have housing, sometimes they do not have any type of housing security. They can be removed from their apartments, their homes that they are renting with no warning and with no recourse if they are discriminated against just because they happen to be LGBTQ plus. And so there is a new property website aimed at helping LGBTQ plus people find inclusive, safe, and welcoming housing, whether it is with queer housemates or with a landlord who respects who they are. I want to say, I'm trying to see what is being included as of this point. But it tries to avoid situations where individuals may get housemates who are not really open to an LGBTQ plus roommate, and so they may create a hostile environment. Or it tries to avoid, just putting people in places where management or landlords are wanting to make sure that they get money to a certain point, but then can jack up the prices so that they can get a better clientele in there. But this is one of the steps that has been taken to begin to create new awareness of housing and the housing problems that we find within the LGBTQ plus community. I do believe it's the whole of London right now. So,
yeah, I just put the link in chat, and I was a little bummed to see that it is in the UK, but we know that that LGBT and specifically trans rights are under a pretty big attack there. So it's good to see that this they have this there. Hopefully we can get something like that going over here. Quote unquote Liberty University has enacted a ban on, let me get this right, LGBT. Oh, what was it? I can't find my headline. Basically, they're already hostile against LGBT students, and now they've made a quiet rule change that makes things worse.
Yeah. So there is an honor code at Liberty University. Now, let me just say this. I went to a university, and well, I actually went to the seminary. The university was across the street. Hey, Ethan, welcome in. Asbury Seminary and Asbury College were both Methodist associated schools. Now, the reason why I bring this up is that there was indeed a code of ethics or an honor code that was required by all students and faculty and staff. You had to obey the code of honor or the code of ethics or anything like that. Liberty University, which is a conservative, religious-based institution, has definitely had its honor code in place for quite some time. But the Liberty Way was updated after Thanksgiving break in 2021 to actively discriminate against students who are members of the LGBTQ community. Queer students at Liberty University live under the daily fear of expulsion based on their sexual or gender identity. Here's what the new code has to say. Sexual relations outside of a biblically ordained marriage between a natural-born man and a natural-born woman are not permissible at Liberty University. While mental thoughts, temptations, and states of mind are not regulated by the Liberty Way, statements and behaviors that are associated with LGBT states of mind are prohibited. Let me go back and read that for you all. While mental thoughts, temptations, and states of mind are not regulated, statements and behaviors that are associated with LGBT states of mind are prohibited. So in this day and age, we call this the fuck the freedom of speech clause. So for example, they give examples. Romantic displays of affection with a member of the same sex, such as hand-holding, kissing, dating, and actions confirming denial of biological birth sex, for example, asking to be referred to by pronouns inconsistent with one's birth sex, using restrooms and changing facilities reserved for persons other than one's birth sex. All of these are prohibited. In personal relationships, students are encouraged to know and abide by common sense guidelines to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Activities inconsistent with these standards and guidelines are violations of the Liberty Way.
I'm very excited for the inspiration. Look very soon on the Transverse shop for LGBT state of mind merchandise.
Oh my God, that would be so cool.
That will be coming. I will work on that tomorrow as well.
Or I'm the gender ideology your mother warned you about.
Oh, whew. We haven't talked about religion yet today, and we focused pretty heavily on it last week. There was a lot of horrible things coming out of the church. Let's get back into that, shall we? Pastor claims God detests pride. The sign has nothing to do, or he claims that the God detests pride sign has nothing to do with LGBT people.
Yeah. So Wesley Whitworth of Wares Ferry Road Baptist Church, and that was a lot of things in there to say, said that his sign was meant to reference personal pride, arrogance, pride, things of that nature. However, he did make clear that homosexuality is a sin. There was a lesbian couple traveling through Montgomery, Alabama on their way to visit family. And one of the couple said that they were very disappointed that during Pride of all months, this church had a sign up like that. Whitworth claimed the sign being erected during Pride Month was mere coincidence because nobody notices a bunch of rainbow encrusted gays in Montgomery, Alabama in the month of June. But I digress. He said that the man responsible for changing the signs told him as such. He said it was not the intent to put that up just to spark controversy. If you have to put the thought into somebody's head, my guess is the thought was already in your head. Despite that, Whitworth said he believes that the Bible sees homosexuality as a sin, but that it's not his job to go around and policing the actions of everybody. I would, of course, make it clear, obviously, that our personal convictions are that this is not just an alternative lifestyle. It's a sin like any other.
And it's not called out as a sin anywhere in the Bible.
We're not going to get into that. We're not going to get into
that. On the flip side of that, back over, I believe in the UK, it looks like a religious university is ordered to recognize LGBT plus students in stunning victory for human dignity. What's going on in this one?
Actually, this is the New York County Supreme Court.
Oh, great. Okay.
A Jewish university, Yeshiva University, was in violation of the city's human rights laws by denying the Yeshiva University Pride Alliance recognition and equal accommodations. The judge ordered the university to grant advantages, facilities, and privileges afforded to all other student groups to the LGBTQ plus group, rejecting the claims that YU had no obligation to do so because it is a religious corporation. Referring to Yeshiva's university's own description of itself in its charter, public messaging, and applications for state funding, proved it is an educational institution, stating that Yeshiva is either a religious corporation in all matters or it is not. Furthermore, the judge explained that the Pride Alliance's recognition did not violate any First Amendment rights because formal recognition of a student group does not equate to an endorsement of that group's messages. The university has confirmed that it will be appealing the ruling, saying that the court's ruling violates the religious liberty upon which this country was founded.
All right, moving on. LGBT plus protesters crashed. Anti-LGBT plus protesters crashed Glasgow Pride, but queer people gave them a deserving welcome. What was that deserving welcome, Jeannie?
So June 25th, this last Saturday, Glasgow was decked in the colors of the rainbow for the first Pride Glasgow in 3 years due to coronavirus. But a small group of less than a dozen counter protesters bearing signs saying homosexuality is a sin set up camp where the festivities were going to take place. Thousands of Pride goers, many of them protesting against the British government's refusal to ban trans conversion therapy, quickly circled the group. Then they drowned out the counter protesters as they carried rainbow flags and kept spirits high. And, it's just fabulous to see that people were, quick to respond to this group and be able to kind of isolate the message that was out there. The Glasgow Metropolitan Community Church, which is an inclusive church, it was founded by and for LGBTQ plus people, were right there. It stressed it is fundamentally opposed to what the counter protesters stood for. And it didn't take long for the demonstrators to get the message. By around 3, the picketers took down their signs and walked away from Pride.
Do you know, Jeannie, if this Metropolitan Church is of the same parent organization that does Metropolitan churches here? Because I know that
most likely it is. It is an international church.
Great.
And so it is very likely that it is connected.
Mm-hmm. Because they're very pro LGBT. Yes. A religious kook rushed the stage to scream at a drag queen. He didn't get the response he expected. Another one where the protest didn't go the way they were intending. What happened here?
Right. So, Youngstown Pride in Youngstown, Ohio, there was a drag queen who was on stage, and an individual with a megaphone rushed out of the crowd screaming, talking about how the drag queen was a pervert, that he was grooming, that he was indoctrinating children. He was also filming my reaction, said the individual who was accosted. Quote, "My first instinct was to tackle him. I did not. My second instinct was to scream back at him. I did not. I have been doing theater for children for over 25 years. As a performer, I'm always hyper aware of my audience and what I consider to be appropriate, especially when it comes to young people. What I could do was counter his message with my own, because the only way to banish the darkness is to turn on the light. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and started to sing. The first words that came to my mouth were, 'Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high.'" So the man got on his megaphone and was getting louder. He began to circle around and getting closer and closer and closer. He told the kids that this was a monster. But the drag queen continued to sing "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." Something happened. One by one, the other performers joined the drag queen. They linked arms and they started to sing along. And then people in the audience began to sing. And they drowned out that voice. In the end, he ran off, pursued not by parents nor by security, but by queer and non-binary teenagers. They were wearing pride flags as capes, like the heroes that they are. By the end of the song, the darkness was gone, banished by the light, by progress, by the future. Afterward, several people asked me if it was all part of the show. I promise you, it was not.
I love one of the sentences in the middle of this. Together we drowned out his message of hate with our message of hope. He had a megaphone, but I had a family.
Yeah, that is beautiful stuff.
Oh, with such warm fuzzies right in the middle of the show. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Here's some of the harsh reality, some of the numbers behind what we have all felt here. I did the math on these two numbers that Gino get into in the study and found that a GLAAD survey found a 132% increase in LGBT discrimination in the last 2 years alone.
Right. So GLAAD has an annual accelerating acceptance study. And what they found is that 70% of respondents in this year's study say they've experienced discrimination due to sexual orientation or gender identity. That was up from 59% in 2021 and 46% in 2020. So in 2020, we were at 46, 2021, 59, and now 70% of those who were surveyed experienced some form of discrimination. It is taking place not in distant, seldom visited corners of their experience, but in their daily lives with family, in the workplace, on social media, in public accommodations, and in interactions with people at their children's school. Respondents see threats to their physical safety. 54% of transgender and non-binary people feel unsafe walking in their neighborhoods, compared to 36% of all LGBTQ plus adults. They feel unsafe in various other environments, including work, social media, and retail. 61% of LGBTQ plus people of color say they face discrimination based on their race or ethnicity as well. I do want to interject personal commentary here. And this is something I said last week. It's something I did a video on, and it's something that I think fits right here. I think it's very important to say it right here. I know a lot of us were hit hard by Roe v. Wade being overturned last week. I want to say that we within the trans community, we've been talking about this. We've been warning people about this. We've been saying that the conservative Christian evangelical political movement that we are seeing has been targeting all of the rights that we have known that we had available to us. And what people were feeling last week on the day that Roe v. Wade was overturned, transgender people have been feeling this for the last 2 years. Nearly every day. If not every day, every 2 or 3 days. If not every 2 or 3 days, every week. Because if you've been tuning into our show, you know that we have been talking about this coming forward. For 2 years now, many of us have already, and Kari's saying the last 6 years. But what I'm specifically referring to is the anti-trans legislative movement that we saw beginning in 2020. And yes, it began in 2020. We have been living with this for almost 2 full years now. We have been living with the constant threat that we cannot go out in public. We have been living with the constant threat that things are going to get worse. We have been living with that constant threat of our rights being pulled from us at any moment. The only reason why they have not is that they have been doing this steadily, slowly, buying purchase on secure land to be able to take one more step. We have watched state after state after state after state leapfrog each other on anti-trans legislation. The thing that we are seeing with Roe v. Wade being overturned, with the announcements that Obergefell and Lawrence are going to be targeted next, and with all of the increasing bills that we see either taking away access to gender affirming medical care for adults, classifying people who are seeking gender affirming care as eligible for deferring that until they are into their 20s, as well as saying that we don't have a public place. All of these bills are continuing to be processed through legislative movements. Roe v. Wade was an event in time. It was a major event in time. But that major event in time has been our reality for 2 years as we have watched the legislation roll out piece by piece by piece. What GLAAD shows us in this survey is that this is not make-believe. To go from 46% to over half of us to nearly 3 out of every 4 of us experiencing discrimination. That is obvious. 54% of us do not feel comfortable walking around in our neighborhoods. And do you know what? That includes me. I take my dogs less than 100 yards to the dog park, and I'm afraid of any new person that I see that I don't know. I hate that Roe v. Wade was overturned. I hate that we know that this is going to build a pathway to remove other rights. But right now, I'm not going to be fighting Roe. I'm not going to be fighting these other legislative efforts. I am too concerned about my own life and the life of my siblings to give one flipping flying fuck about what the Supreme Court is doing, because I have to fight every day for my life. Personal commentary over.
The tough thing here is that what the Supreme Court is saying in their ruling on Roe v. Wade basically is that if it isn't listed in the Constitution as a right you have, the federal government can't protect you from discrimination about it.
Exactly.
It's up to the states to decide what rights you have, and it really flies in the face of what the Constitution is and what it's meant to so many of us for so long. In that it was the idea, and that all of us are created equal and we have certain inalienable rights. And then apparently this set of judges says that if it's not explicitly listed in the Constitution as a right, then you can have it taken away.
Exactly.
And somebody made the comment, and I'm not a constitutional scholar either, that women aren't mentioned in the Constitution. Period.
Not in an affirming, practical way, not in a way of guaranteeing them rights. The only way that they are mentioned in the Constitution is through the amendment that gave them the right to vote.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that this means that their take on it is that yes, any right that the states want to take away from you, it is their right to do so,
Yeah.
which again is very anti the idea of our Constitution. And yeah, there's nothing that's safe any longer. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Moving over to sports as we get to our last couple articles here. International Rugby League bans trans athletes, and it looks like FIFA and World Athletics are likely to follow.
Yeah. This came on the heels of the world swimming um, ban that we saw last week, that we talked about last week. Now we are looking at FIFA, the International Football Federation. They are reviewing gender eligibility regulations and talking with expert stakeholders within that. Due to the ongoing process, FIFA is not in a position to offer any specific statements as of this time on any proposed amendments that may be coming forward. World Athletics president said that the organization's council will examine its policy at the end of the year. And so, with the FINA, the World Swimming governing body, voting to restrict participation of trans athletes to anyone who began transition before the age of 12, this is now setting up a domino effect among the world athletics associations to begin to talk about how are they going to incorporate new guidelines to recognize trans athletes.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, let's just call it on the table here. A person who transitions before the age of 12 does not exist. That is something that no state in the United States, I believe, allows, nor I would think most people in most countries, because I'm sure they're talking about HRT, probably not surgeries, but hormone replacement, and that's not something that happens that early. Blockers, yes, but HRT, I don't think anybody's gonna pull for that. So it's a coward's way of banning transgender people all out, outright. And in our last story, we haven't talked about this charming individual in a while. Dave Chappelle defends his transphobic jokes as he declines to have a theater named after him in his high school. What's going on here, Jeannie?
So there was a lot of news and information bouncing around because Dave Chappelle, who graduated from the Duke Ellington School of the Arts in Washington, D.C., he had donated money to the school's theater. That's what I was trying to get to. He was associated with it. He had given them money. He had kind of helped them raise some monies. The school had said they were going to change the name of the theater to honor Dave Chappelle. He said, I used to skip school and I would hide in there when I was skipping class. Who would have thought that the theater would one day be named after me? Now, that was at the acceptance speech much earlier. According to the Washington Post, Chappelle has turned down the honor, and the venue will be renamed the Theater for Artistic Freedom and Expression. And it comes after one of the students had called Dave Chappelle a bigot. And the school's head teacher had said that she's had meetings with students after Dave Chappelle's special, The Closer, came out to talk about the jokes related to transgender people. The school said in a statement, moving forward with the event, without first addressing and concerns from members of the Ellington community would be a missed opportunity for a teachable moment. Chappelle then said at the dedication ceremony last Monday, the idea that my name will be turned into an instrument of someone else's perceived oppression is untenable to me. He added that he was sincerely hurt by the students' backlash to his special. I took a lot of cold shots in business, but that day they hurt me. No matter what they say about The Closer, it is still one of the most watched specials on Netflix. The more you say I can't say something, the more urgent it is for me to say it.
So he's just missing the message all the way around.
Yes.
And as I pointed out in an earlier article, doing that same thing of avoiding the responsibility. You know,
And Netflix has already agreed and signed Dave to another special. That was supposed to be his last. The closer was supposed to be the last of 3 specials Dave Chappelle did for Netflix. The co-CEO did say that Chappelle has signed a new agreement for a new special to go on the
it's
streams.
not going to be his stand-up comedy. It's him producing and bringing in other comedians. So
Right.
I just particularly take issue with the statement of just because you say I can't say it, it makes it more important for me to say it. And it's like the thing that we have issue with you saying is not making jokes about trans people. That's actually fine. Like there are funny things to talk about trans people. What is not okay and does not and should not be said further are the lies and the horrible rhetoric that's been put around about us.
Yeah.
That's the part that is bad and we take issue with. And you should not repeat those lies and that harmful rhetoric to make our community less safe.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when you tell a joke and then that joke is turned and used in public addressed to someone. Okay, so let's talk about comedy here for a second. The structure of comedy is that a comedy bit is a self-contained unit. A comedian stands up, they tell a joke. It is a self-contained unit. But when that self-contained unit is then taken from the context of that bit and it is injected into public discourse with another person, intending to target that person as the butt of that joke, the comedy bit has gone too far. It has already extended itself beyond the boundary that it is supposed to exist within.
All right, that is all of the articles we have for you tonight. Jeannie, anything else to add?
No, I don't think so. I mean, hey, we got ahead of the game.
We did. We're letting everybody out of school early here. I love it.
All right, be responsible with being let out of school early. Do not, raise hell. Do not cause problems. Do not do anything that may get you suspended. Don't tell dirty jokes on the air.
There was a comment in chat earlier. 12-pack of tacos, a 12-pack of beer. I think that's more the line we should be focusing on there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
All right, y'all. That is our show for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. For Genevieve Bergman and Kari Aiden in the production booth there, I'm Emily Kleckner, wishing you good night and good news.